And I suppose that's how it is with most young people in Holland. You go to church and we spend most of our time in church playing checkers and just having a fun time. And the message never reached us, really, if there was a message, and I suppose there was. The churches used to be filled in those early days. I was back in that same church this last October, and a church that seats over 1,000 people on a given Sunday when I was there perhaps had only 70, 75 people in it. So religion and the religious system, although it's very, very strong in Holland, it's the state church, for example, it has turned people off today, and people are disenchanted because it has so little meaning. While I attended a Sunday school, a Baptist Sunday school in Holland for some time, there in that school they sang gospel choruses, different from the hymns that we sang in the church. And those had a gospel message in them. And I think even then I became a little bit more sensitive about what these songs were saying. I thought I would go to heaven only because I was doing the things that were expected of me. I followed the rules, so to speak, and I went to church, and I did a lot of bad things in my young years, and I thought that somehow God would understand, and He was a kind being who surely knew that we were not perfect, and that someday, as we hear so often, my good works somehow and the good things would outweigh the bad. But when I came to the United States, it was not long at all before I was invited by people to come to church and to attend youth meetings. And those people were entirely different from the kind of people that I had associated with in Holland. In fact, I distinctly remember being invited to one meeting where I thought they probably had planned an entire meeting around me. And in fact, when I watched them close the doors, I think I saw them lock the doors, and I noticed a lot of people looking at me. And when that preacher spoke and pointed his finger, I thought he was continuously pointing his finger at me. Obviously, he was not, but I thought he was. And I thought the message was pointing in my direction. And it was something I'd never heard. It was a message that spelled out very clearly that man was a sinner, and that the wages of sin is death, that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And except a man be born again, he cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. And that really puzzled me because I'd never really heard that message before. And I thought, this has to be a message made in America. And I wanted to get out of that place, and I did. I convinced my folks to join a different church. They had been attending a certain place. And I thought, we've got to find a place where things are more like they were in Holland. And we found such a place. And I remember one time visiting the preacher and talking with him. And I said, I've been to a meeting where they told me I had to be born again. What does it mean to be born again? He put his arm around me and he said, John, just don't visit those places. They'll get you all mixed up and confused and alarmed about nothing. You're a Christian, aren't you? And I said, well, yes. You believe, don't you? Yes. Well, then why get excited? And he made me feel more comfortable. But you see, it didn't end there, because from time to time, people would corner me and hand me literature, a gospel tract, or I would be invited to meetings. I met a young lady who became my wife, and she had a brother who was just like that. And I no more met him, and he was already preaching at me, you see, with the same kind of message. We married and lived with her mother, and her mother listened to a number of gospel broadcasts on the radio, early Sunday mornings especially. And we occupied an upstairs bedroom, and I could hear the radio go on at 6 o'clock in the morning and full blast, till 9. And by then I'd had my fill. I didn't want to hear anymore. And I think she did this for me, for my benefit. I thought they were all after me. And I was not going to give in to a message made in America. I'm a Hollander. I've gone to church all of my life. I've been baptized, confirmed, and done everything I was supposed to, and nobody's going to convert me to some off-brand religion. I actually asked the company I worked for to transfer me, and I moved all the way to California. Got as far away as I could. Practically 1 foot in the Pacific Ocean. But the same kinds of people were on that beach. The same kinds of people were on the streets in Los Angeles. My wife got a job at UCLA, and the lady she worked for was one of those people. And before long, I found myself in another church where the preacher was pointing his finger again. I was becoming involved in a Bible study. I was again singing those kinds of songs that I had heard at one time in Holland. And gradually, I would say gradually, those songs took on new meaning. And I had to come to a point where, as proud as I was, I had to admit that I had been wrong all of these years. And not only I, but there could be a multitude of people out there that could be wrong. I didn't think that was possible. And I had to come to that point of admitting that, yes, indeed, Scripture is like a mirror, and I see myself, I see the reflection, and I am indeed that sinner that the Bible speaks of. And I knew that I was, as a sinner, I stood guilty. And if the Bible was indeed true, then I could not go to heaven unforgiven. And it was that understanding then and that conviction that brought me to Christ. I cannot even point exactly to a day and say, today I was a lost, miserable, hopeless sinner, and the next day things totally changed. It was a gradual change, perhaps because of my upbringing. I didn't need to be convinced that there was a God. I didn't need to be convinced that God created this world. I knew that. I knew there was a hell. I knew there was a heaven. So all of those things were understood. But it's just that peace that became mine when I took that step and understood that I had to recognize that I was a lost sinner. Things changed. Things changed marvelously, but again slowly. We then had an interest in studying the Scriptures. We loved the fellowship with other believers, which before I would have no part of. I became involved in a singing group and various gospel ministries, and so gradually the Christian life, and which now of course is quite a few years ago. I'm still learning so many things today, but each day it seems that God teaches us new lessons. When I came home after I became a Christian, I came back to Wisconsin for a vacation, and I told my father what had happened to us. He reacted violently, and I remember him shaking his fist at me, and he says, "Don't talk to me about this. I will not listen. We're in a church, in the church, and you're not going to talk us out of this church into another church." And of course this had nothing to do with church, but he reacted violently. Then shortly after that he had a heart attack and ended up in a hospital, and he was seriously ill. And I remember visiting him, and he grabbed my hands and he said, "John, don't let me die. I'm not ready to die. I'm not ready." And he cried, he wept. He says, "Don't let me die. I'm not ready." A short time after that, while working as a custodian in my brother's store, he one night knelt by his mop and his pail and committed his life to Christ. That totally changed him. Changed my mother, my sisters, my one brother, and the entire family changed and was slowly, gradually converted one by one. My dad, some years after that, died of cancer. And he died with a song on his lips and a song in his heart. That time he was ready. And that's when Christianity counts.
Hmm.